Yet another exhausting day, I sighed as I kicked off my shoes and dropped my bag by the door. The aroma of Greg's famous spaghetti bolognese wafted from the kitchen, beckoning me. But before indulging, I had to check my email. I settled onto the couch, laptop in hand, scanning through the usual work updates and notifications. That's when an unfamiliar email from Greg's account caught my eye. Curiosity piqued. I opened it, only to be greeted by a fancy restaurant reservation. For two, my brow furrowed as I reread the details. This couldn't be right. Greg and I hadn't planned any special occasions. A sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach as doubts began to surface. "Greg?" I called out, my voice edged with tension. "Can you come here for a second?" Moments later, he emerged from the kitchen, that easy grin of his plastered across his face. "What's up, babe?" I studied him, searching for any tells, but his expression remained infuriatingly nonchalant. Wordlessly, I pivoted the laptop, the incriminating email on full display. Greg's features froze, just for an instant, before that familiar mask of innocence slipped back into place. "Oh, that? It's nothing, just a mix-up at work." "A mix-up?" I echoed, skepticism lacing my words. "For a romantic dinner reservation?" He shrugged, maintaining an air of indifference that grated on my every nerve. "You know how it is, the admin team gets things crossed sometimes." Every fiber of my being screamed that he was lying. But without proof, I knew pressing the issue would only lead to another circular argument, something we'd become all too familiar with lately. So I forced a tight smile and nodded. "If you say so." But even as we settled in for dinner, the lingering doubts gnawed at me. This wasn't just a simple mix-up. I could feel it in my bones. Greg was hiding something, and I intended to find out what. That night, I tossed and turned, Greg's deceit weighing heavily on my mind. As a social worker, I developed a keen sense for sniffing out lies. It came with the territory, and every instinct told me that my husband was hiding something big. The next morning, I decided to take matters into my own hands. While Greg was at work, I fired up my laptop and started digging. It didn't take long to locate his email account. We'd never been the type to hide passwords from each other, at least not until recently. I felt a pang of guilt as I scrolled through his inbox, but my conscience was quickly overshadowed by what I found, a lengthy email chain between Greg and someone saved only as GS. The contents made my blood run cold. Flirtatious banter, intimate details, and plans for secret rendezvous, all right there in black and white. My hands trembled as I copied the damning evidence onto a flash drive, knowing I needed to gather more proof. That's when I remembered the woman I'd seen Greg meeting a few weeks back. At the time, I'd brushed it off as a work contact, but now, I couldn't be so sure. With a renewed sense of determination, I grabbed my keys and headed out, tailing Greg from a discreet distance. I watched as he stopped at a quaint cafe, taking a seat at an intimate corner table. And then she arrived, a petite blonde with a dazzling smile that seemed all too familiar. My heart pounded in my ears as she leaned in, greeting Greg with an affectionate embrace. The way they held each other, the lingering glances, it was painfully intimate, like two lovers reuniting after a long absence. White-hot anger surged through my veins, followed swiftly by a bitter chill of betrayal. In that moment, I knew without a shadow of a doubt, my husband was having an affair. I wanted nothing more than to storm in and confront them both right then and there. But I knew that would only give Greg the upper hand, allowing him to twist the narrative as he so often did. No, I needed to play this smart, gather enough evidence to back him into a corner, leaving him nowhere to hide from the truth. Only then could I truly make him pay for his deceit. With a deep, steadying breath, I turned and headed back to my car, already formulating my next move. Greg had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, a mistake he would soon come to regret. A few days later, I found myself at a social workers networking event, the perfect opportunity to gather more intel on Greg's mystery woman. As I mingled with colleagues, a familiar face caught my eye. Mira Johnson, an old friend from college. "Marlena, I didn't know you'd be here," Mira exclaimed, pulling me into a warm embrace. Her eyes sparkled with genuine delight, a refreshing change from the fake smiles I'd grown accustomed to. "It's been too long," I replied with a smile, relaxing into the comforting familiarity of her presence. "We really need to catch up properly." Mira nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. Oh, you'll never guess who I ran into last week. My heart skipped a beat, wondering if fate was about to deliver the answers I'd been desperately seeking. Who? Gwendolyn Smith, she exclaimed. Remember her? That girl you two were always fighting over in our dorm days? The name hit me like a punch to the gut, the memories flooding back in an instant. Gwendolyn, the blonde bombshell who'd made our college years a living hell with her petty jealousies and relentless pursuit of any guy who caught her eye, including my then-boyfriend, Derek. Gwendolyn, I repeated, my tone laced with disdain. What's she been up to these days? Mira's expression shifted, her brow furrowing slightly. Well, that's the thing. She seemed really chummy with your husband, Greg. The words hung in the air like a lead weight, confirming my worst suspicions. It all made sense now. The secret emails, the hushed meetings, the lingering glances. Greg's mysterious woman was none other than my old nemesis, Gwendolyn Smith. That lying, cheating snake, I spat, my hands balling into fists at my sides. He's been carrying on an affair with her this whole time. Mira's eyes widened in shock, her mouth falling open. No way. Are you serious? Greg always seemed so devoted to you. I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head bitterly. Apparently not. That bastard's been playing me for a fool. Anger and humiliation washed over me in waves, threatening to drown me in their intensity. But I couldn't let the emotion consume me. Not yet. I needed to stay focused, to gather enough evidence to nail them both to the wall. Mira, I need your help, I said, my voice low and urgent. Tell me everything you know about Gwendolyn and her history with Greg. To her credit, Mira didn't hesitate, launching into a detailed account of their apparent closeness and Gwendolyn's thinly veiled disdain for me. With each new revelation, the pieces fell into place, painting a picture of a calculated, long-simmering scheme for revenge. By the time Mira finished, my jaw was set in grim determination. Greg and his mistress had made a fatal mistake in underestimating me, and they were about to pay dearly for it. That evening, I confronted Greg the moment he walked through the door. We need to talk, I stated firmly, arms crossed over my chest. He barely batted an eye, shrugging off his jacket with a casual air that made my blood boil. Sure, what's up? Don't play dumb with me, I snapped, glaring at him. I know all about your little affair with Gwendolyn Smith. For a split second, Greg's mask slipped, his eyes widening ever so slightly, but he quickly recovered, letting out a dismissive scoff. Gwendolyn, are you serious right now? That's just crazy talk. Is it? I challenged, stepping closer until we were nearly nose to nose. Because I have proof, Greg, emails, eyewitness accounts, everything. His gaze hardened, jaw clenching. You've been spying on me? Real classy, Marlena. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. I exploded, my voice rising with each word. You're the one carrying on an affair behind my back. Greg's expression darkened, an ugly sneer twisting his features. Maybe if you hadn't been so wrapped up in your precious career, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere for attention. The words hit me like a slap across the face, striking at the very insecurities he knew I harbored. For a moment I faltered, doubts creeping in, until I remembered the truth staring me in the face. Don't try to play the victim here, I spat, regaining my fire. This has nothing to do with me or my job. It's about you and your sick need for attention, no matter who you have to hurt in the process. Greg opened his mouth, likely to spew more venom, but I cut him off with a raised hand. Save it. I'm done listening to your lies. I stepped back, squaring my shoulders with renewed determination. From now on, I'll be fighting fire with fire. And when the smoke clears, you and your little mistress are going to wish you'd never crossed me. With that, I turned on my heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind me with a satisfying bang. I could feel the tide shifting, the paradigm between us irrevocably altered. Greg's betrayal had awakened a fury within me that wouldn't be sated until he paid the ultimate price. As I slid behind the wheel of my car, a plan began to take shape. If Greg wanted to play dirty, then so be it. But this time, I'd be holding all the cards. The first step? Gathering undeniable proof of his misdeeds, the kind that would leave no room for his usual manipulation tactics. I knew just where to plant a hidden camera to catch him in the act, red-handed. With a grim smile, I started the engine and peeled out of the driveway, my sights set on victory. Greg had made his bed, and now it was time for him to lie in it. Permanently. The hidden camera was a stroke of genius. I'll give myself that. Within days, I had all the proof I needed of Greg's sordid affair, captured in damning high definition. I watched in sickened silence as the footage played out, Greg and Gwendolyn tangled in a heated embrace, their bodies moving in a sickening rhythm. But it was the conversation that followed which truly sealed their fates. "We have to be more careful," Gwendolyn purred, running a perfectly manicured nail down Greg's bare chest. "Marlena's already getting suspicious." Greg let out a derisive snort. "Let her suspect all she wants. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late." My grip tightened on the computer, knuckles straining white. Too late for what? As if reading my mind, Gwendolyn continued, "You're sure you can pull strings to get me that promotion over her? I'd hate for all this." She gestured between them with a salacious grin. "To be for nothing." "Consider it done," Greg replied with an arrogant smirk, pulling her closer. "Marlena's been living on borrowed time at that company. Once I tarnish her reputation, they'll have no choice but to overlook her for the job." White-hot fury blazed through me as the harsh reality crystallized. This wasn't just about broken vows. It was a calculated scheme to sabotage my career, my livelihood. To take everything I'd worked so hard to build and grind it into the dirt. In that moment, the floodgates burst open, unleashing a torrent of rage and betrayal unlike anything I'd ever felt. How could he? After everything we'd been through, everything I'd sacrificed to build this life with him? I wanted to scream, to hurl the laptop across the room until it shattered into a million pieces. But I couldn't, not yet. No, I needed to stay in control, to approach this strategically, like the clinical professional I was trained to be. Only then could I extract the revenge they so richly deserved. With a deep, steadying breath, I closed the laptop and began pacing, my mind already whirring with potential scenarios. I could take the evidence to the company, effectively torpedoing Greg's plans to undermine me. But that felt too impersonal, too corporate and detached. No, I needed a more visceral form of retribution. A public humiliation that would cut to the core of their arrogance and leave them disgraced, their reputations in tatters. A slow, wicked smile curved my lips as the perfect plan took shape. I would let them have their little dinner date, let them revel in their perceived victory, only to pull the rug out from under them in the most brutal, comprehensive way possible. Yes, Greg and Gwendolyn would get their comeuppance, all right, and by the time I was through with them, they'd be lucky if the ashes of their shattered lives were enough to fill a teacup. With a renewed sense of purpose, I began making arrangements, the gears of my meticulously crafted revenge already in motion. They wanted to play dirty? Fine by me. This was war, and I didn't intend to take any prisoners. The annual company gala was in full swing, a glittering affair filled with the city's social elite. Greg and Gwendolyn swept in like royalty, reveling in their perceived victory over me. Little did they know, I had a few surprises in store. As the evening progressed, I bided my time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Finally, as Gwendolyn took the stage to accept her undeserved promotion, I made my move. Before we proceed, I called out, my voice ringing clear across the hushed ballroom. All eyes turned towards me, but I kept my gaze locked on the stunned expressions of my traitorous husband and his mistress. "I'm afraid there's been a terrible mistake," I continued, striding forward with purpose. "You see, this promotion was meant for me until certain individuals conspired to undermine my reputation through lies and deceit." A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd as I produced the sleek remote control, thumbing the button to project the incriminating footage onto the massive screen behind me. Greg and Gwendolyn's illicit affair played out in lurid detail, their hushed conversation about sabotaging my career echoing through the suddenly silent room. "You see, ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the captive audience, "my husband thought he could have his cake and eat it too, carrying on an affair while plotting to destroy my professional life in the process." I fixed my glare on Greg, who had gone deathly pale. "Did you really think you could get away with it? That I'd just roll over and let you trample all over me?" Before he could respond, I rounded on Gwendolyn, who looked fit to faint. "And you were always jealous, weren't you? Petty and small, lashing out at anyone who dared outshine your fragile ego." With each biting word, I advanced on the pair until I stood mere feet away, reveling in their abject humiliation. "Well, no more," I declared, my voice hardening to steel. This is where your manipulation ends. Turning back to Greg, I let the weight of his betrayal crash over me one final time. You have a choice, Greg. Resign, effective immediately, or I take this evidence to the authorities and pursue charges for corporate sabotage, fraud, you name it. His mouth worked soundlessly, the arrogant bravado he usually cloaked himself in shredded to tattered remnants. Well? I pressed, quirking an expectant brow. What's it going to be? In that moment, it was as if all the fight, all the pompous disdain, drained out of him, leaving a hollowed husk in its wake. His shoulders slumped in defeat. I'll resign, he muttered, unable to meet my gaze. A hushed gasp rippled through the crowd as I allowed myself a grim smile of satisfaction. With those 3 words, the power had shifted irrevocably, and he knew it. As security led the disgraced pair away, the ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. Well-wishers and colleagues swarmed around me, offering congratulations and commendations for my integrity. But I brushed them all aside, focusing on a single thought: justice, finally served. And it tasted sweeter than I could have ever imagined. The gala's afterglow still lingered as the crowd thinned out, leaving only a smattering of revelers. I stood off to the side, savoring a well-earned glass of celebratory champagne. Marlena? The familiar voice made me turn to find my boss, Jonathan, regarding me with a mixture of awe and respect. I can't begin to express how impressed I am by the way you handled this situation. I offered him a gracious nod, the bitterness of Greg's betrayal finally starting to ebb. I only did what was necessary to protect the company's integrity. Jonathan shook his head firmly. It was more than that. It was an incredible show of character and resilience in the face of such underhanded tactics. His gaze turned solemn. I'm deeply sorry you had to endure such a violation of trust from someone you loved. The words hung heavy in the air, raw emotion welling up, but I swallowed it down, lifting my chin. Thank you, but that's all in the past now. I managed a small smile. I'm just glad the truth finally came to light. As are we all, Jonathan agreed with feeling, which is why I wanted you to be the first to know. The leadership position is yours if you'll accept it. You've more than proven your mettle. A surprised breath escaped me as the implication sank in. After everything, I was being rewarded with the very promotion that Snake Gwendolyn had schemed so ruthlessly to steal. Poetic justice, indeed. I thank you, Jonathan, I replied, equal parts humbled and elated. You can count on me to give my full dedication to this new role. A smattering of cheers and applause broke out as word spread, a small crowd gathering to offer their congratulations. I accepted them all with as much grace as I could muster, still reeling slightly from the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. Eventually, the well-wishers dispersed, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As my gaze swept over the opulent ballroom, now devoid of its glamorous trappings, a profound sense of closure washed over me. This chapter of my life, the one marred by Greg's poisonous deception, was officially closed, and a new one beckoned, brimming with hard-earned promise and the respect of my peers. Perhaps for the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed the tension to bleed from my shoulders, exhaling a deep, cleansing breath. Greg and his tawdry schemes held no power over me anymore. I was free. As for what lay ahead, only time would tell. But one thing was certain: I would greet it head-on, bolstered by an unshakable self-belief forged in the fires of sweet, well-deserved revenge. Yes, the future was looking brighter than ever, and I had every intention of basking in its warm, liberating glow. A few months later, I settled into the plush leather chair behind my new desk, surveying my freshly appointed office with a contented smile. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of settling into my hard-won leadership role, but the swirl of activity was an invigorating change of pace, one I welcomed with open arms. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my reverie. Come in. Mira poked her head in, beaming. Hey you, got a second? For you, always. I waved her inside. What's up? Oh, not much, she said airily, sliding into the chair across from me. Just thought I'd pop in and see how the big boss lady is adjusting to life at the top. I rolled my eyes good-naturedly. Please, it's not that grand. Just a new set of challenges, that's all. Uh-huh, and I'm sure you're tackling them all with your usual flair. Mira's expression turned serious. Honestly, Marlena, I'm really proud of you for how you handled that whole mess with Greg. You could have easily crumbled, but instead you rose up stronger than ever. My chest swelled with a mixture of pride and humility. Coming from someone like Mira, whose friendship and support had been utterly invaluable these past months, the words carried profound weight. "Thank you," I replied simply, holding her gaze. "I couldn't have done it without you, and the other amazing women in my life who had my back." Mira nodded, seemingly satisfied before that familiar mischievous glint returned to her eye. "So, now that you're all professional and important, does this mean you'll be too busy for us regular folk?" I barked out a laugh. "Get out of here with that. You know you're stuck with me." "Good," she grinned, "because I wouldn't have it any other way. We celebratory drinks tonight? My treat?" "You're on," I agreed with a smile, already feeling the burdens of the day melting away at the prospect of an evening of laughter and commiseration with my closest friend. As Mira excused herself, I leaned back in my chair, basking in the quiet satisfaction of a life and career finally back on track. Greg's betrayal still stung, that much was undeniable, but the ache had faded into a dull throb, easier to compartmentalize with each passing day. A faint buzzing from my computer caught my attention, a news alert with Greg's name in the headline. I clicked through, unsurprised to find it was another sordid account of his continued downward spiral in the aftermath of our very public, very messy split. Gwendolyn's name featured prominently as well, cementing her role as his partner in undoing. According to the reports, she'd relocated to someplace far away, her misguided ambition to take what wasn't hers, ultimately her own undoing. I exhaled a soft snort, shaking my head. Let them wallow in the squalor of their self-made misery. As for me, I was too busy thriving to spare them a second thought. A memo caught my eye, reminding me of the upcoming mentorship program orientation. I felt a swell of pride coursing through me. Nurturing the next generation, passing along the hard-won wisdom I'd accrued over the years. It was an honor and responsibility I didn't take lightly. Who knew? Maybe by paying it forward, I could help spare a few bright young minds from falling into the same traps I once had. If my own trials and tribulations could serve as a cautionary tale, a message of perseverance against all odds, then it would have all been worth it. Yes, this was the start of an incredible new chapter, I mused, energized by the possibilities that lay ahead. One forged through the flames of heartbreak and betrayal, certainly, but also one tempered by the resilience that had seen me through to the other side. And as I closed my eyes and drew a grounding breath, I silently vowed to conduct myself with the same integrity and purpose that had been my saving grace all along. No matter what storms may come, I would face them head-on and emerge victorious. This, I could finally say with conviction, was only the beginning.